Hey, party people.
Hello.
Welcome back to week 5 of 6 of the Audience Building Bootcamp. This week, we will be talking about how to start a community, which is really what we've been talking about this entire time. But now we're going to get into the nitty gritty of like, okay, I feel like I've prepped everything. I feel like I've started my social media, my website, all the things. Now, how do I get the people to come to me? Great question. I'm so glad you asked, because that's what we're going to talk about for the next 20 to 25 to 30 minutes. Yes. And as always, if you have any questions during the conversation, feel free to ask a question in the chat and drop it there, and we'll be happy to answer it. There will be Q&A time at the end of our presentation. Mm-hmm. All right. Mm-mm-mm.
Glorious slide presentation.
Boom. As always, we start with a meme of the week. Very important. This one cracks me up because, yeah, it's really important to not be distracted by the internet, but at the same time, it's also important as an author to exist on the internet, because that's how we sell books in the modern era, in the 21st century, because of what I just said. I don't want to be redundant. Kyra, any additional thoughts here?
No, I just concur with all aforementioned statements, because at the end of the day, it's about navigating that balance of like people knowing who the heck you are. And really, most people meet each other over the interwebs these days. But also, if you're constantly cultivating your image, you won't have work to represent with your image.
Yeah. And as indie authors, you are all relying on your own connections, what you've got to work with, versus when you sign with a major publisher, what you're getting in exchange for a really large portion of the rights to your work is all of their connections.
Yeah.
Effectively. It's still going to end up being the author's responsibility to really work on selling their book, but their connections are massively helpful. And so as indie authors, we recognize that connections are helpful, and we recognize that those connections are going to have to come from us and that we're going to need to put in the work. So let's talk about how to do that, how to build our own connections, how to maintain them, how to grow them, etc. So building strong relationships, 5-minute favors, the exercise in how to do that, and then the importance of connecting with humans humanely, because they are people and not just numbers on your follower list.
Mm-hmm. So yes, the importance of building relationships, which is a slight nod to the play title, The Importance of Being Earnest. So I just thought that I should throw that out there in the event that you guys are fans of Oscar Wilde. But humans need community. That's just true. If anything, if we learn anything from, frankly, the still ongoing, but like hopefully receding pandemic, isolation is not fun. Nobody enjoys it. You can be the most introverted introvert, but at the end of the day, everyone needs community. And so community is essential to success, in the same way that healthiness and happiness can't happen in isolation. Neither can success.
Because you've heard it takes a village.
Yes, exactly. That's it's true.
You can't do stuff all by yourself. And what you'll learn throughout the publishing process, and what I'm sure you've already learned in the writing process, is that nobody writes a book alone. Mm-hmm. You may be the only author's name listed on the cover at the end of the day, but in your acknowledgement section, you will be listing a ton of people, editors, backers, supporters, and the like, who helped make your book a possibility.
Exactly. So also, of course, it's important for you guys to be intentional about building community for the sake of your book dream coming into fruition. But, community should be pursued for its own sake. Again, just to maintain your wellness throughout this whole process, because there are times when it can feel particularly isolating. There are moments when you have to be more intentional about outreach, like during your fundraising campaign or during a point where you're asking for early praise and reviews and things like that. But there are other moments when you feel like you're by yourself. This community focus will remind you that you are grounded in a broader context. And it also reminds you that your book is going to be shared with the world, which is honestly one of the biggest motivations in the most quiet, like the quietest alone hours. Like,
Yeah. And you want to start that now. So sooner rather than later, to make those asks that Kyra mentioned, fundraising, reviews, etc., so much easier, because it's really easy for me to ask Kyra for a favor because we've already built a connection. It would be way harder for me to ask insert random viewer for a favor because we haven't built a connection yet.
Exactly. And a huge bullet point here is people don't want to feel commodified.
No.
Know when you're using them as a means to an end. They know it. We're not going on Machiavelli on these people. We're not, right? Like, we have to acknowledge the multifaceted nature of a person's humanity. And yes, like, there might be an aspect of their identity that might make them better suited to support us than, say, another person. But you're not just like, hey, I noticed that you and I like the same color. Therefore, this book is relevant to you. The end.
Yeah. You don't want to be that MLM person from your high school going, hey, I've got this great opportunity for you. We haven't spoken in 10 years, but would you like to invest $3,000? No.
Oh, yeah. Excellently said.
So, how do we build connections with people, especially over the internet, right? Question mark. 5-minute favors.
Yes. So, I mean, 5-minute favors can have a variety of different manifestations depending on who it is you are reaching out to. Say, for example, you want input or feedback from an author, like that you really respect in your respective genre. Leave them a review on a book that of theirs that you enjoyed first.
Yes.
Like, indicate your investment into their brand before you ask them for something. Like, that's a way to do it with somebody you don't know as well. Or if somebody's on the fringe of your network, be sure to indicate, like, A, that you've noticed other things about their lives. Like peruse their social media and see, like, oh, I noticed that you've done this, this, and this. How was that? And also, if they have a project that's happening in their lives, like, say they're doing a pre-sale about something, reach out and say, is there any way I can help you with that? Because reciprocity, at the heart of the 5-minute favor. So it's interesting, and Mackenzie can, of course, help me, like, flesh this out a bit more. But there seem to be 3 types of people in the world. There are the people who are straight up givers, who just will give without necessarily having to be asked or expecting anything in return. There are the people who are takers, which sounds bad, but really isn't. They're just people who are, like, inclined to ask and receive things. And then there are the people who are more in the middle, and I'm forgetting the exact word for it. Is it
neutral?
Like neutral? Negotiators?
I think maybe it's negotiator.
Yeah, something like that. But basically, they're the people who will give. They will give with the understanding that they will also receive.
Yeah, that's the negotiator. You scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Exactly. And so this 5-minute favor is here to appeal to the negotiator, really, in all of us. Because even if you fall on the opposite and, like, at different ends of, like, the broader spectrum of this, like, people like it when you do nice things for them, which will make them more inclined to be willing to help you in this 5-minute favors framework.
Yes. So, examples of 5-minute favors. What kinds of things can you do that really only take 5 minutes or less? Give or take. That would give you the opportunity to make a connection. So, like Kyra said, each of these is going to come down to what specific relationship you are trying to build, and how you feel you can best spark that connection. For example, if you want to connect with a well-established author, leave words of kindness on their work that you have read. Surely you've already read it because that's why you want to connect with them. Other examples for literally anyone, even if it's readers, book influencers, and the like, share their post. Share it either, in an Instagram story, or share it on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and provide thoughtful commentary. Tag people, like and share a thought in the comments on 2 of their posts, recent posts. Don't be too creepy. Caveat with that one. Don't go back like 36 weeks and then like, and, you know, comment on their recent posts. Read their most recent long form post, like it, share it, or comment on it. As you can see on the bottom of lots of blogs, there's opportunities to comment within the web page. That helps them out a lot in sharing and showing credibility on their work. Do you have any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, one of the best ways to think about 5-minute favors is just imagine you being on the receiving end of it. And if you would be sketched out if somebody did it, then don't do it.
And it's one of those things we want to avoid, just hitting follow and messaging someone in a DM right away, asking them for a thing, right? We know that you want to ask them for a thing, but let's try to build something up first and look as little like a bot as possible. Very important. And the more time you put into this over time, aka starting now and doing this for maybe, let's say, 5 people a day, instead of sitting down with your list of 100 people and doing them all at once and getting thrown in Instagram or Facebook jail because you're doing too much and the computer thinks that you're also a computer. Imagine that. So we want to avoid that. We also want to avoid putting too much work on you all at once, because that's really stressful. And then what we want to, opposite of avoid, create is healthy habits of interaction on the internet. You know, these little 5-minute rituals and interactions, so it doesn't feel like, oh God, I got to set aside 2 hours today in order to just do a bunch of my marketing stuff. Oh, look at that.
Oh,
deal makers.
Aha!
I promise we looked at the slides beforehand.
Yeah,
we made them.
Yes, you did. I'm not. Yeah. Yes, but yes, most people are deal makers. I think negotiators has a nicer ring to it, but you know, I could be biased because we just said it. But anyway,
it's the same thing. They're synonyms.
Yeah, I know.
But yes, we don't want to exploit people that bad, because we want to treat people like people. That's the most important piece to this. So, yeah.
I alluded to this earlier.
I know I kind of skipped over this slide. I will say there is a document in materials and templates titled 5-minute favors tracker. And what it is for you guys is a place where you can go ahead and it's in the documents below. It's also on Quip for those who are on Quip. It's a place where you can track all of the people that you make connections with now, so that later, and all of the favors that you do now, so that later you can follow up on those, cash them in, as it were. If you need to do another favor, if you need to do, you know, if you've already a tracker. So we built a framework for you guys, so you can just go ahead and fill in the blanks.
Yes. Reconnect.
So yes, once again, Kyra, yeah, go ahead. Why do we do this? What's the importance of being earnest? Why is it so critical to treat people like people in doing this?
Because I mean, from a purely logistics or like numerical or conversion perspective, people respond better when you treat them like people, like just purely for the sake of metrics.
And what we mean by that is being as personal in your outreach as possible.
Exactly.
So try to avoid copy and pasting an entire message as much as possible.
Exactly. Templates in and of themselves are fine, but if you have a template, make sure that there's like some place where you put an entire sentence, at least a couple of sentences specifically to that person, like something that's particular to their lives or their connection to you, because people can tell when something is templated, and that doesn't garner as genuine of reaction or engagement. So yes.
If it's a person you don't know, you want to say something like, loved your most recent post, read your most recent work, just left a review, really thought this point that you made was XYZ.
Exactly. So another huge component of this is, so as Mackenzie was alluding to, you're going to be reaching out to people that you know, especially you're going to lean into the people that you know, because you know a lot more people than you think you do, right? Reconnect with people inside of your network. And when you are reconnecting with them, connect with the intention to connect. Like, of course you want for the connection to result in their engagement or them directly supporting you. But if it doesn't, genuinely, I think you all are very nice people because I've had the opportunity to interact with many of you. But don't enter into the space from a place of entitlement. Like, don't be like, hi, I did this favor, now do this thing.
Yeah. Think of it as something of a manifestation, because if you just enter in and say, I'm just going to make this connection, this is for networking, this is going to be a good thing for me, and something good is going to come out of this. And eventually it will.
Yes, exactly. Sow the seeds. You would be amazed. Like what casual connections or intentional connections that you build, what comes to fruition later. And Mackenzie and I can both tell you all kinds of stories, but that's for another time. Yeah. I mean, again, when you start to have a conversation with someone and start from the personal, it really does depend on how close you are to the person you're reaching out to, because somebody might already know about your book journey and have been explicit in engaging with your book journey content. So if it's somebody who's already aware of it, you could just kind of start with that, right? But if you haven't talked to them in a long time, you don't want to be like, hi, I'm writing a book. You want to ease into it. And I promise, and I love this bullet point, I promise you will not forget to make the ask. Mackenzie wrote that one. Yeah. So you won't forget. Like it'll come up, But
yep, because you'll say, what's going on with you? How are things? And if you're talking to a normal human, they're going to go, what's going on with you? And you're going to be like, oh my God, boy, do I have news. I've been trying to write a book and it is a bear. And then they're going to go, what? That's so cool. And there you go.
Exactly. And then again, it's all about being intentional sooner rather than later. You guys have really the process in earnest will start in the actual pre-sale process will start in late March. March 31st is the launch day. It's early February. It's still early February, right? Yes. It's early February. So y'all have the time to sow the seeds now, very, very intentionally. So you don't have to worry about scrambling and being like, oh my gosh, I have everything to reach out to. Everyone to reach out to. I have all the things to do. Then this is for people particularly going through or anticipating the pre-sale process within the New Degree Press program. For other people who may be watching.
Yes. Well, for anyone else who's watching, if you're planning any sort of crowdfunding or major campaign to ask people of things in bulk, you're going to want to start way before you actually launch said campaign to make more asks. So what I mean is start today making connections with people and making sure that you're posting about your journey generally, but then having individual conversations with people who you know will be interested or want to support you in some capacity, and just have conversations with people,
right?
Whether it's in person or on the internet, so that when you launch on the 31st, easy money.
Exactly. And just to sort of emphasize the importance of starting sooner rather than later, if you don't start sooner and if you procrastinate this process, you'll encounter our colleague, John Saunders, who always says, I mean, can you raise money or can you afford a time machine? Because that's what you need, in order to make this possible. So we're trying to raise towards publication. We're not trying to raise for a time machine to then go back in time to subsequently raise money for the
This is the time machine moment. Kyra and I are actually coming to you from the second week of April, and we're telling you that you need to watch this now and start now.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Totally. So that's all that. Questions, comments, confessions regarding any of those things. We're opening the floor to, ask a question. Where's my Q&A button? I don't know, but ask a question. And so I'm going to look at the comments here. Hello.
Oh my gosh, y'all are great.
Do you recommend partnering with companies to promote and pre-order your books?
Yes. And you have to be very intentional about laying the groundwork for this now. It also depends on, it's all about alignment. Alignment is key, and 5-minute favors for businesses are going to look different from 5-minute favors for individuals.
Yep. You're going to want to start that process as soon as possible, because if you start that collaboration on the first day you launch your campaign, that's too late. Because especially with companies, you're going to go through a lot more red tape and steps in getting someone to support you or bulk pre-order your books. It can be done 100%. It happens. People do it every year. But I say start sooner rather than later, especially for these people, for companies, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, because it's going to take more time. It's not that they're not interested. It's just that, well, we got to talk to accounting. We got to make sure that this is set. It's just, there's a lot of bureaucracy. But we do recommend it. I just want to throw this up because that's cute.
Thank you. Virtually hugged.
This would be easier if y'all were, if we were all.
This is a fairly accurate assertion, I will say. But I think that the thing that I appreciate about the interwebernets is that everyone is present.
Yes.
You just got to find your people.
Yep. They're there. Your audience is there. The entire internet is not just 18 to 20-year-olds, I promise. Kyra and I are on there.
We're kind of exposing ourselves a little.
we're not that small.
Not.
Should you start prepping people to get messages about pre-order before the actual pre-order begins? Yes.
That's an excellent question.
And you want to know how you do that? So when we were talking earlier about how you start talking to someone and saying like, hey, how's your life? How are you doing? And then they reciprocate and they're like, hey, how's your life? How are you doing? You're going to go, oh my God, I'm writing a book. It's such a bear. And actually, I'm going to start fundraising to fund the costs of those books, of creating that book at the end of March. And they're going to be like, oh my God, well, let me know how I can help. And you're going to be like, great, I'm so glad you asked. You can contribute, or I can add you to my email list, or you can share my posts. Like, they will want to be your advocate, and you will turn them into one in whatever way you think would be fit. And if they don't naturally say, oh my God, how can I help? You can introduce the idea and say, I would love for you to join me on my journey. You know, take a look at my campaign page, give me some feedback. Even get them to the campaign page, get them to watch your video, get them to read something. It doesn't necessarily have to be go and buy, right?
Yeah.
Just, would you be willing to take a look and give me some feedback? Or did you see the video? What did you think? Like,
exactly.
Get them to the page.
Exactly. That is huge. So there are 2 points on that. One of the biggest barriers in people actually following through to make a purchase is the amount of clicks it takes to get to the page. So they're thinking to themselves like, ugh, like I have to go all the way to the page and I have to make the purchase. Once people get onto the page, it is a much more likely, there's a much higher probability that they'll actually be able to follow through, because just a couple of clicks away from being able to support you. Which is why there's like this whole, marketing component of like, clicks and the amount of pages between things. But we won't bore you guys with all those details. All of this is to say, is just to reinforce Mackenzie's point of being sure to make the link as accessible as possible to them, and really ask for their feedback, because that played a huge role in attracting people to my page. I was just like, oh, like this is the thing that I'm doing, and I would love your thoughts on how I can refine my messaging, etc. And then they were like, oh my goodness, this is so cool, I got to copy. And I was like, yes. You have fallen into my trap. Anyway, and then another thing, and we're going to talk a little bit more explicitly about this, especially next week, but start to think about who you're going to reach out to now, what you want to have in time for the beginning of the publishing process, particularly for new degree press people, and really for anyone. You want to have at least 100 names written out so that you know that when you begin like formal aspects of your outreach, you can hit the ground running, because one of the biggest obstacles in outreach is knowing who the heck do I start to reach out to, like who, and you have to be cognizant of who you know. And again, you know a lot more people than you think you do. Something that is really, really helpful, particularly in pre-sale campaign momentum building, is that you want to have 30 people or 30 backers support you within the first week. And if you can get 30 people to commit to supporting you within the first day, that's even better, because that exponentially improves your probability of meeting your pre-sale campaign really quickly. So,
yeah. When do we do our intro video? I'm thinking that you're referring to your campaign video.
mm-hmm.
And Kyra, do you have an idea of when that will start? Because does it start before they meet their MRE?
Yes.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah. So you will, once you walk through all of the publishing agreement components with Heather, she will point you to next steps pertaining to the recording your intro video.
So the sooner you get your agreement things sorted out, the sooner that process starts. So as soon as Heather sends you your agreement, you're going to want to make that a priority to review it and deliver it. And then you can start your video, and your video will be ready for when you launch your campaign. The later you start, the less likely it is that your video will be ready for the day that you launch your campaign.
Yeah.
So just bear that in mind. Mm-hmm. Would video campaigns help? So we'll tell you that it does help your campaign page to have a video. It gives you about, I want to say 20 to 30% more success, however you want to measure that, whether it's via clicks, length of time spent on page, or contributions to your campaign. So you're going to want to do it. And if you really, really, really don't want to do it, that's your prerogative. But I really, really, really think that you should. And then video campaigns in general, outside of the video meant for your campaign landing page, really good idea. Because like we've talked about, it's important to diversify your content, and people love to know the face behind the project. So if you get up there and you're saying, look at me, hello, I'm going to talk about this passionate thing that I'm passionate about passionately. And people will naturally feed off of that. So video campaigns do help. Kyra, how do you get a local bookstore involved pre-publish?
So it really does depend on local bookstores function independently most of the time. So it's going to sort of function on a case-by-case basis. A lot of mom and pop shops, at the very least, are willing to circulate author materials, especially since you're a local author. And if you're sharing that, hi, I'm in the midst of a book writing journey, if you have flyers, QR codes, things of that nature, local bookstores are really, really, really excited to circulate the word about that. Things about local bookstores that might make it a little more complicated from like a financial support standpoint is that they might not be able to pre-order copies, especially if they order their books directly from distributors like Ingram Spark. Yep. So the actual purchase of copies may or may not be on the table, but local bookstores can just be a great place for you to become known in the community as an author.
Yep. You can also ask the local bookstore if you can be on their newsletter, if your campaign can be featured on their newsletter and presented to their audience. So you drive more people to the campaign page and potentially get new contributors. So that's another thing to always think about if you're ever wondering, like, can I partner with someone? And your immediate thought is going to be, I want them to pre-order books, but that might not be in their capacity in the case of bookstores or nonprofits, for example. But remember that they do have an audience that can help you because they're interested in the same thing that you are, something related to your book and your topic. So you want to ask them if they would be willing to feature you on their newsletter or if they would be willing to feature you on their social media. So don't forget that that is a thing. Should we be devoting the 5-minute favors to one social media platform each day? So like Instagram one day, then Facebook or Twitter another day. I mean, that's one way to think about it. There are all kinds of different ways you could segment this. You could decide that you want to do one person on Twitter, different one on Instagram. You can social media hop to your heart's content. I personally, this method is appealing to me, only dealing with one platform per day. because it's really easy to just get inundated, lost in the sauce, as it were, and down the rabbit hole in all of these different places.
Mm-hmm. I concur.
Let's see, any other questions? Can it work almost like a consignment shop with a local bookstore? Ask them to put some books on the shelf and only pay if they are sold. That's going to be a thing once you're published. So it's not going to be a thing when you're in the pre-sale funding the cost to produce your book phase. That's something that absolutely a lot of local bookstores will either order in bulk from Ingram Spark, or they might order in bulk from you, and they might pay you up front just at the wholesale price, or you enter into a consignment agreement. So a lot of bookstores also will have these things listed on their website. Mm-hmm. So give that a look, because they might have a consignment form up and ready to go for you to fill out and submit. So that looks to be all of our questions for today. If you do have any additional questions, you are always welcome to reach out to either one of us on Quip or at these things below on the ticker or in the description. So with that, next week, we're going to be talking about how to maintain your community. Now that we're working on building it, how do we maintain it while we're doing all these other things and keeping that maintenance as simple as possible and as not stressful as possible? And it'll also be AKA how to have a successful pre-launch. If you are interested in pre-launching anything, not just books, but pre-launching your book, fundraising, campaigning, how to do that successfully through the power of community, that will be what next week is about.
Exactly. Well, we're super excited. It's also a little bittersweet because that will be technically the last installment of this particular boot camp. But we're around. We're here to support you.
Totally. Well, that is all for today. It's been a pleasure spending time with all of you. See you next week.
Bye.